Hi, I'm Jilly G. Welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm going to show you how to make my apple cider turkey. And I've already got my oven preheated to 375. This turkey recipe is delicious and it's one of my favorites. I don't make it every year, but I do really enjoy it. So on the chance that I get to make 2 turkeys in a single year, this is the recipe that I make. But I do love my other turkey recipe that is also here on my channel. That one is usually my go-to, but this one is definitely a favorite. And that's what this contraption here that I've got going on is for. I'll show you that in a minute. Whenever you're going to cook a turkey, you do need to plan ahead. If you buy a frozen turkey, you really need to plan ahead and make sure it is thawed. If it's still a little frozen in the middle, it's okay, but you don't want it rock solid frozen. As you can see, I've got my turkey in the sink, and it's been thawing in the fridge for about 4 days, and then I've got my roasting pan right here. Once I've got it rinsed off and I've taken out the insides, I can just put it right into my roasting pan. And then my roasting pan, I do have a rack in here. So the first thing I always do with my turkey, and maybe you can see that, there is still some ice around here. But the first thing I do is I take out the little popper. I've never found them to be accurate, and I've got other thermometers that work better. So you want to make sure to get out all of the things that are on the inside. And they're usually in a package. And then I do have a bowl in my other sink here that I'm just going to drop these into. And if your turkey is thawed enough, these should come out pretty easy. But mine still has a lot of ice in it, even though it's been thawing for 4 days. So there's the neck. And then I usually go through and try to get out any big chunks of ice. And be very careful not to touch everything with your raw turkey hands. So in cold water, I'm going to rinse off my turkey and try to get most of that ice out of there. And once you've got your turkey all rinsed off, I usually let it drain here for just a minute and then lift it into my roasting pan. And you want breast side up. So now that my turkey is washed, and I'm just going to leave it sitting back there until I'm ready for it. So what I've got going on here, I did mention this is an apple cider turkey. You can buy apple cider, but sometimes I have a hard time finding apple cider that doesn't have a lot of sugar in it. Unless you know a local place that you can get it, that it isn't really expensive. But I came across a recipe where you can kind of make your own. And this is just a pumpkin that I have. I always buy pumpkins like this for decorations, and then I usually will cook them and use them in pumpkin recipes. The pumpkin is not part of the recipe, but I use that pumpkin because it's really kind of heavy. So what I've got in here is just a plate, and then I've got my strainer, and it's kind of wedged in my stock pot here. And you don't have to use a stock pot. I just used a stock pot because this is what my strainer fit in. And then I've got 3 layers of cheesecloth, and then in here I've got apples that I cored and then I just put through my blender. Once my apples were finely chopped, I wrapped them in this cheesecloth and I tightened it really good. And then I put this plate on here, and then I put that pumpkin on here for the weight, and then I let this sit overnight to really press all of those apples and get the apple cider into this pot. And it really doesn't give you very much. It's a lot of extra work for how little amount it actually gives me. And for that matter, all we need is 3/4 of a cup of apple cider for this recipe. But look at that color. Sure looks good. And it smells like apples. And then I have a little jar here. I'm just going to put the rest of my apple cider in for something else. Oh, that's a perfect fit. Before I put this in the fridge, I do want to taste it just a little bit, just to see how apple flavored it is. That is so delicious. And it's nothing but apples. It is so surprising to me how sweet it is. If you had to, you could substitute apple juice in place of the cider. But a lot of times apple juice has a lot of extra sugar in it. But this is delicious. For a little bit of extra work, so worth it. So in my little saucepan here, I'm going to pour in my 3/4 cup of my apple cider. Carefully. Very full. And then I have a 1/4 cup of maple syrup. And I just got done telling you not to get juice or cider that has a lot of sugar, and I'm adding maple syrup to my cider. But what we're going to do with this mixture is heat it up and then just let it set, and then we'll baste our turkey with this mixture. So I'm going to turn that on low while I get the rest of my ingredients ready. And I've got about 5 apples here, and I'm not even sure what kind they are. I know this one's a Golden Delicious. These ones are either Jonathan or Gala's, I can't remember. And then I'm not sure what these ones are. But it doesn't matter. Use whatever apples you've got. Use your favorite apple. I got a bowl to put my apples in. And then I've got 1 large onion that I cut in pretty big chunks. I've got 4 garlic cloves that I've cut in half. And then we'll get to the rest of the ingredients after I get my apples cut up. And then I'm just cutting my apples in not really big chunks, but kind of. Nothing fancy at all. And I really like using a combination of apples for this recipe. And I did the same thing when I was making my cider. I used a combination of different apples. Cut off any bad spots. And while I want these to be in big chunks, I don't want them too big because I do want to be able to fit them inside the turkey cavity. Instead of stuffing my turkey with stuffing, I usually stuff it with other things. Always onions, always garlic. And today it will be apples as well. So now that you are ready to stuff your turkey, I always like to have everything ready. It's kind of a pain to have to stop in the middle of dressing your turkey and wash your hands to get something you might have forgot. It does happen. So my apples, onions, and garlic. I do have a couple of tablespoons of butter here. About a teaspoon of salt and pepper. And then in this bowl, I have 1 tablespoon of poultry seasoning, 1 tablespoon of thyme, and 1 tablespoon of sage. The thyme and the sage are from my garden. You can use fresh or dried. And even though these are from my garden, I have dried them a little bit. And that's it that goes into this turkey. So what I do is I start loosening the skin very carefully. You don't want to tear it. And then you just get your hand in there and loosen it as far as you can. And I think I've said this before, and I always forget until I'm doing it, but it would be better to mix your butter with your herbs, and then you just have to spread everything once. But I forgot again, and that's just fine. And then you can try to go around the drumsticks. Sometimes it's kind of hard to get your hand underneath the drumstick there. And then I like to take out this little plastic thing. I find it just gets in the way. So now I'm going to take a couple of pieces of onion and break them apart a little bit. Get them in there. Take a handful of apples. Get those in there. Take a few garlic cloves. Get a little handful of my herbs. Just do your best. And then a big pinch of my salt and pepper. And then I can fit a little bit more onions and apples inside of my turkey. Doesn't have to be pretty, just get them in there. A couple more garlic. And then you can put this little piece of turkey right there. So then I'm going to start with my butter here. And just rub your turkey with your butter. And you really want soft room temperature butter, just like this, that you can really mash it around. And I go inside and outside. Give your turkey a little massage here. Do your best. I'm actually going to mix my herbs with my butter. Definitely a messy job, but so worth it in the end. Gives our turkey so much flavor. And then I'm just going to spread the rest of it on top. It's kind of hard to get it to stick when your turkey is kind of damp, but that's all right. Try to tuck under the wing the best that you can so it doesn't burn. And now we've got apples and onions left over. So I'm just going to put them all around my turkey. Ooh. Forgot about my salt and pepper. Just sprinkle this a little bit of everywhere. Salt and pepper is always to taste. Get the rest of my garlic and the rest of my apples, same thing. Just go all the way around the turkey. That wing doesn't want to stay. And there's really nothing to it at all. So now our turkey is ready to go in the oven. It's preheated to 375. My cider and my maple syrup are just coming up to a simmer over low heat. So I'm going to turn that off and then give it a good stir here. You don't really have to. So we'll just set that aside. We're not ready for it yet, but we did want it to heat up to just combine it. So now this will go in the oven with no cover for about 45 minutes. One thing you always want to do before you get your turkey ready to go in the oven is make sure your roasting pan and turkey will fit on the rack that you've got in there. Many times I've done a much bigger turkey than this one and it's too tall. And then you have to take out a hot rack. So always plan ahead. And I don't think I mentioned this turkey is about 12 pounds. So after 45 minutes, and your turkey is getting a little golden brown, we're going to pour on our apple cider and maple syrup mixture. And I just very carefully pour it all over, trying not to disrupt my herbs and things that are on top. It doesn't look like there's a lot of liquid just yet, but there will be. So this is where we want to cover our turkey. If you have a really big turkey, I can fit a pretty good sized turkey in this pot, but the lid won't fit. So if you have a pan that has a lid and the turkey won't fit, just cover it with foil. So this goes back into the oven, and in about 20 minutes, I'll baste it with the juices that are in the pan. And then I usually turn it around so it's the other way in the oven. You don't have to do that. So while that's going for another 20 minutes, set the timer so you don't forget. So in my saucepan here, I have the neck and then all of the innards that were in that little bag. And then I've got 2 cups of chicken stock, all in there. So I'm going to bring that up to a boil and then turn it down to a simmer, put the lid on, and then let that simmer for about 45 minutes. It's been 20 minutes. And if you have to, just tip the pan so you can get the juices. There is quite a bit of juice here at the bottom. And so I just very carefully baste my turkey and then put the lid back on, and we'll go for another 20 minutes or so. It's been another 20 minutes and I'm basting my turkey again. But I want to check the temperature. And I do have an instant read thermometer here. And whenever you're checking, you want to make sure you're not hitting bone. And then I usually test a couple of different spots. Almost there, but not quite. I'm going to put the lid back on and it will go back in the oven for about 15 minutes. It's been another 15 minutes. You want to make sure your turkey is all the way done. And it's really interesting. It used to be 180 was the temperature that you wanted your turkey to be done. Nowadays, it's a little bit lower. And I always check multiple places just to make sure. So I've got a cookie sheet here. And what I'm going to do is transfer my turkey to my cookie sheet and then cover it with foil. And before I do that, I'm going to flip the pan around so I get a better angle on my turkey. And if you've done a good job, your turkey might fall apart. There we go. So we want our turkey to rest. We don't want to carve it right now, but we do want it to stay warm. And while that is resting, I do have a bowl here with my strainer and my innards that have been simmering. I'm going to strain out this liquid here. And then I also want to strain out my juices that are in this pan. I'm going to take out the rack. I don't want it to fall while I'm trying to tip up the pan. And I do have a big pot of potatoes that are coming up to a boil. And they're just regular russet brown potatoes. And I like to leave the skins on. And then I've got some really soft butter, about 2 tablespoons. And then I've got 2 tablespoons of my gluten-free flour. Mash the butter around a little bit, and then I'm going to add in my flour. And this will be for the gravy. What we're doing with this butter and flour is we want to make a paste. This is one of my favorite ways to make gravy. Although cornstarch is really good to thicken gravy as well. But I feel like the butter really just adds a richness to the gravy. And now that I've got my paste made, I've got my pan drippings and my other simmered liquid from the innards. I'm going to pour it right back into the same saucepan, and I did wipe it out. I want some of the bits that were kind of stuck on the bottom, but I don't want a lot of the little fatty pieces that had, clung to the side of the pan. I'm going to check on my potatoes, and this water is salted. And one of the things I like about stirring a big pot of potatoes with my masher is you can lift up your potatoes and see if they are fork tender yet. My potatoes are almost done, so I'm going to get started on my gravy. And I'm just going to turn it on about medium. And we want to bring this up to a boil, but not a rapid boil. Once my gravy starts to simmer like this, I start adding in my butter paste a little bit at a time, whisking really well. We don't need this to rapidly boil, but I do like to have it at a slow simmer. If you feel like it's boiling too rapidly, you can turn the heat down to low. And don't worry if it looks a little lumpy right now, the butter will melt and the flour will dissolve. And once that first little bit is dissolved, I'm going to add in my next little spoonful. And one of the things I love about making Thanksgiving is there are so many things that you can do ahead of time. Whenever I have a lot of people that are coming for dinner and a really big turkey and a lot of side dishes, I will usually cook my turkey the day before. And then it's all cooked, I can carve it, I can make my gravy, and then the next day, just reheat it in the roasting pan, already carved. And when I do that, I will usually pour some of the juices from the pan on the carved turkey before I make my gravy. And that way the turkey doesn't dry out. And for mashed potatoes, I usually cook those first thing in the morning. I get them all mashed and all ready to go, and then I put them in my crock pot on low heat, and then they are out of the way and ready to go and staying warm. Mashed potatoes get cold so fast. For me, the crock pot is the perfect way to keep them warm, but also it frees up your stovetop to make other things that you might need to make. This is the last of my flour and butter paste, and I'm going to stir the spoon around to get it all off of the spoon. I don't know if you can see this or not, but it is getting thicker. I'm going to taste it and see if it needs any salt and pepper. And I am going to add a little bit of salt and pepper. I'm going to turn the heat off and periodically stir that while I carve my turkey. I've got my potatoes all mashed. I got them all mashed when I was waiting for the gravy to come up to a simmer. Bring this closer to me. And if you feel like your gravy is too thick or too thin, you can always add a little bit of milk or cream or even some more chicken stock if you feel like it's too thick. If you feel like it's too thin, then you would just do what we've already done. Add some more butter flour paste until it's the thickness that you'd like. But one thing I've always noticed about gravy, it gets thicker the longer it sits. And I've mentioned before, whenever I make gravy that's going to sit out on the table, I prefer it to be on the thin side. That way, if somebody goes back for seconds, the gravy won't be like jelly. So what I usually do with my turkey is I go along and kind of get the skin off of here. I'm not going to carve the whole turkey today, but I will carve some of it and taste it. I should do this other side here so you can see what it looks like. And I don't ever throw away the skin. I always save it, and it goes in the pot when I'm making stock with my carcass. And even though it's been sitting for about 20 minutes, there is so much steam coming off of here. Not doing a very good job carving opposite of where I'm at, but that's all right. I'm just going to get a little bit to taste. But look at that. It's perfectly cooked. It's still really juicy. So much steam is coming off of here. Let me get a little bit more to taste here on my plate. It is not the easiest thing to carve a turkey opposite of where you're trying to look at it, but that's all right. You get the idea, and I've shown you in other videos how to carve a turkey. So I've got a little bit of turkey here on my plate. Give our gravy a little stir here. Get a spoonful of mashed potatoes. Not a super thick gravy, but just the way I like it. Put some on my meat here. I don't know about you, but I like lumpy mashed potatoes and I like runny gravy. And if I'm going to be picky, I prefer dark meat over white meat, but that's all right. It's easier to carve the dark meat when you're carving the entire turkey. So let's give it a bite. That is delicious. It's so surprising how much flavor is in a turkey. I love all of the spices. The apples actually are coming through. Give my mashed potatoes and gravy a bite. So good. Even if you don't like apples, this turkey and this gravy with the apple cider is delicious. It's not a super strong apple flavor, but just enough to give it a hint of apple, and it's absolutely delicious. Let me know what you think if you make this recipe. Maybe it's your first year cooking a turkey. Maybe you've made 1,000 turkey dinners, and this is a new recipe to you. It's so delicious. It uses apples that are usually in season right now. And I know it doesn't look like anything fancy. I don't even have it on a fancy plate. But this is just my turkey and potatoes and gravy. When I have Thanksgiving with all of the fixings and all of the side dishes, then I will bring out the nice china. And even though I made this recipe with a turkey today, this is something you could absolutely do with a chicken. And I haven't met anybody yet that doesn't like the apples and the apple cider in the gravy. But thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have any questions or comments, let me know, and I'll see you on the next one.